welcome to the deep dive. We've got a story today that really makes you stop and think.
Absolutely. It's quite something.
We're looking at this really unusual interaction involving a former U.S. president, Donald Trump, and just an ordinary citizen from Morocco on social media.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing you don't see every day.
Yeah.
And our source material for this dive really uses this seemingly small event to unpack some big ideas.
Big ideas about power, communication, how things work, really.
Exactly. So we're working from a specific text that recounts this event and gives its own analysis.
And our mission here is to stick closely to that source. We want to explore the facts as presented in the text.
And then really dig into the questions the source itself raises about authority, communication, democracy, the whole package.
Right. It's about understanding the narrative and the viewpoint within this specific material we have.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so the central figures, according to our source text, are former President Trump.
And this Moroccan citizen, Haji Filali.
And how does the source describe Hajjalai?
Well, it identifies him as the head of the Moroccan Union of Green March Volunteers. And it makes a point of saying he's from the working class. It uses the Arabic term askaya.
Okay, working class. And what else?
A key detail the source really emphasizes is that his communication with Trump, this tweet, was totally spontaneous, not set up beforehand or anything like that.
Got it. And the union he leads, the source gives some context there too, right?
Yeah, it explains that this union represents people who played a significant national historical role in Morocco. And our source uses this background, well, it uses it to set up this really interesting contrast.
Ah, the paradox. This is where the source really digs in.
Exactly. It focuses heavily on this stark difference in Haj Ali's experience with communication, sort of two sides of a coin.
Okay, so what's the first side?
On one hand, the source highlights what it sees as this amazing ease of international communication. I mean, think about it. According to the source, Haj Ali sends a tweet and gets a response from arguably the most powerful political figure in the world at that time.
Just like that. A direct line, essentially.
That's how the source frames it, this incredible global reach and directness enabled by tech.
But then there's the other side of the paradox.
Right. The flip side, according to our source, is the alleged difficulty of domestic communication.
So communicating within Morocco itself.
That's the claim in the text, that this same person, Haj Ali, faced significant challenges trying to communicate within his own country.
Does the source give specifics on that?
It does. It reports, and again, this is based on the source's account, that an attempt Haj Ali made to communicate with the royal palace in Morocco about certain issues. Well, it apparently went unanswered.
No response received, according to the text.
Correct. And furthermore, the source explicitly states that Moroccan authorities actually prevented a gathering.
A gathering?
Yeah, in Rabat, back in 2023. It was supposed to bring together something like 42 different associations of these Green March volunteers to celebrate Throne Day. The source says it was blocked.
Wow. So the source draws this really sharp line. Easy to reach the U.S. president via tweet, reportedly difficult to communicate locally or even hold a planned event.
That's the core contrast the source is built around.
And based on this setup, the source writer has a strong take on Trump's engagement, right?
A very strong take. The source describes Trump's direct response as peak ethics.
Peak ethics. That's quite a phrase. Oy kilam kimanalaklak in the original, I believe.
That's the one. And the source's reasoning. It argues that for a head of state of that global stature,
like the U.S. president,
to communicate directly with someone the source specifically describes as marginalized and oppressed in their own country.
Using the terms oyokil one lamajuamakwa.
Right. The source sees that specific act of direct communication as having profound ethical weight.
And the source adds another layer too, doesn't it? About how common this is.
It does. The text notes that this kind of direct interaction between top leaders and ordinary citizens is, according to the source, quite rare in the Arab and Islamic world.
So the writer uses that as a kind of benchmark, highlighting why they see this particular exchange as so significant.
Exactly. It serves as a point of contrast. And this whole incident, this tweet and response, it becomes a springboard for the source to ask some much deeper questions.
Okay, so let's unpack those questions. Remember, these are the questions posed by the source text itself.
Right. The text uses this event to probe further.
First up, democracy and tradition. What's the angle there?
Well, the source implicitly asks, could this event be evidence that modern tools like Twitter, in this case,
These democratic mechanisms, so to speak.
might actually be more powerful, or at least offer a way to bypass older, perhaps more restrictive local customs or bureaucratic barriers to communication? Can tech leapfrog tradition?
Interesting. Like a new pathway opening up.
That seems to be the suggestion. And then the source connects it to the idea of justice.
Justice. How so?
It brings up this phrase, the time of Omar, or U'utnin, Zaman Umar.
Which is often used as a symbol for, like,
Yeah.
an ideal era of justice and fairness, right?
Precisely. Our source seems to use it that way. It's implicitly asking, could this kind of openness, this direct line, maybe push society even slightly closer to that ideal state of justice, linking a very modern interaction to this sort of timeless aspiration?
So it's tying a tweet to a classical ideal of good governance.
In a way, yes. The source also briefly touches on the political context.
Getting.
Like, how did the specific political climate at that exact moment maybe make this interaction possible? Or, conversely, make other communications harder? Were there other factors at play? It hints at political calculations.
Okay. And there's another theme running through the source text, too, isn't there? About speaking out.
Yeah, the text seems to suggest, maybe subtly, that there can be a cost to speaking truth or expressing a view that goes against the grain.
How does it put it?
It implies that sometimes doing so can feel like you have the whole world against you, that facing opposition is a real possibility.
So let's just circle back and summarize that core paradox again, because it really is central to the source's whole argument.
Absolutely. The text presents this situation. One person, Haj Ali Falali, can apparently reach the highest international authority with relative ease, just a tweet.
While, according to the same source, facing significant roadblocks communicating within his own national context.
That contrast, that tension, is the absolute heart of the analysis presented in our source.
And what's the bigger picture the source is pointing to?
The broader implication highlighted is how technology, platforms like Twitter, are fundamentally changing the dynamic between citizens and authority.
Creating new ways to engage, maybe.
Potentially, yes.
Wow.
Does it create new avenues for participation, for influence that kind of operate outside the established traditional structures? That's the question the source raises.
Which leads us to the final, really thought-provoking question that the source leaves hanging in the air. What are we supposed to make of a situation as described by this source, where reaching someone thousands of miles away might seem, in practice, easier than having a conversation with authorities or institutions much closer to home?
It really makes you pause and think about connection, communication, and power in today's world. Different kinds of distance, maybe?
It really does. So starting from this single, quite surprising tweet, our deep dive into this source text has really unpacked a fascinating contrast.
And layers upon layers of questions the source raises about power, direct communication, technology, justice, tradition.
It definitely encourages us, following the source's lead, to look closely at these specific moments and think about what wider patterns they might reveal.
Absolutely. Food for thought.
So here's something for you, the listener, to mull over, building on what our source explored. Think about your own life. Where does communication feel easy, effortless?
And where does it hit snags, unexpected barriers? Is it about physical distance, or are other things more important, like structure or hierarchy or just habit?
What does the specific analysis in our source text suggest to you about the real landscape of communication today?